I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?
And you're on Bound for Glory on SYN. Big weekend in football. Going to be discussing all the weekend's games, previewing the games on today, including the Bombers and Collingwood clash, and also talking about all things ASADA, the investigation and what's come out during the week. You're joined by myself, Jordan Kinneal,
Matt Joyce,
Peter Williams,
Ben Kazubi,
and Damon.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, really long week in football, probably the longest week in football for a while. A lot of it not football related, so I think we should start with football first, because it's something that a lot of people have been saying that it hasn't been spoken about much this season. This season is obviously taking a back seat to other issues, but I think we'll start on Friday night. North Melbourne, for what it felt close to the final siren and being there, and the crowd, you could feel a sense of relief that finally North Melbourne beat a side that they obviously are playing well enough in games, just not for long enough, and it felt definitely towards the end that they set up and they worked, and players sort of held, you know, they were confident in what they had to do towards the end of the game, and they got the scalp that they were after.
And I get the feeling all season, it's not a surprise, because North Melbourne have been playing at times like a top four side in terms of offensiveness, but then there'll be that lapse for a quarter where they look like a bottom four side, literally, and it'll be just cut right open. And for once, even though that started to occur and Geelong started to get on top, North Melbourne managed to hold on, which was great.
North seems to have this, I guess, the edge over Geelong, and I'm not really sure what it comes down to, but 2 goals between Petrie, Hansen, Tarrant and Black, and the rest came from midfielders, with Bastanak and Wells and whatnot having a few between them. Do you think it was an intentional move from Brad Scott to try and make the Cats midfield, go both ways and make them work defensively?
I think there was especially a certain aspect of making Geelong run and overlap. There's Geelong like going through the corridor, and North Melbourne tried to make them accountable because they like to get ahead of the contest, they like to run in waves, and North, when they won the ball, they were out. And I felt that especially they didn't get the rebound Geelong like getting off half back, which is from players like Lonergan and Taylor. Lonergan had 2 touches for the whole game, and I felt when North Melbourne went inside 50, they went short. They didn't just bomb it long, which would play straight into Taylor's hands. They went short, and obviously all those midfielders were about 40, 50 out inside 50, and they were taking those marks just inside 50.
And good on North Melbourne for getting up, because as a neutral supporter watching the game, the umpiring throughout the game was absolute trash.
That's umpiring.
It was 11 to 25 at the end for free kicks. Was that just the last quarter, or was that the whole game? Because it seemed very biased throughout, and it was quite ridiculous to see the exact same calls not get. I know everyone goes on about it again and again each week, but in a big Friday night game with North, who still honestly have a shot at playing finals, if Essendon get done, who knows, they could slide into 9th spot, and who knows what could happen from there.
And just on the free kick front, what do you guys make of the goal that was paid to Vardy, which appeared to shave the post? I don't know if it swung back at the last minute or if it shaved it.
It shaved the post.
Looked like it from the front on angle, as though it did.
From where I was, it looked like a goal.
No, did you get to see the actual replay? Because you could see it. It was really windy, so it was going clearly through the middle. Then it really swung towards the right, and then as it passed the post, it moved back a bit left. So it could have been the wind. It could have not been. I think inconclusive was the best way to judge it.
Because we couldn't tell. We were just just bounce the ball. We don't care.
I think why don't all umpires have the third eye cam on their hats? Because that seems like the perfect time to use.
Well, for Fox Footy, obviously they use that for their coverage. Channel 7 don't, and from what I understand, they don't like putting cameras boundary side on, which would give us, in my opinion, a better indication of if a ball's diverted or moved off something, or even if it's something, is it over the line or not. I think that is the way to go, but it's not utilised by Channel 7.
Well, Channel 7 doesn't utilise HD, so what do they
don't utilise commentators that don't make you want to strangle someone. So,
maybe they can have that DRS, and instead of the cricket bat, it's the goalpost.
The snicko. So if Khawaja's, having a shot for goal, who knows what's going to happen?
That was the worst thing I've ever seen.
But we are in a good position, though. So
yeah, good, good to see us bat. But I don't think we're going to be speaking about that.
What do we make of Drew Petrie's speech post game in terms of potentially coming in ninth spot? Do you think it was? What do we think about it in general?
I think
it's a bit cheeky.
I think he answered the question that was put to him. I think it's something that is a possibility, and if you're going to be honest about it, Essendon might not play finals. And look, we're already talking about Essendon again, but he's right. He answered the question honestly. There's a chance Essendon aren't going to play finals, and teams like North Melbourne and Carlton and maybe even West Coast are half a chance to fall into ninth.
And if North were, whoever say that did happen, they'd end up playing at this stage, it looks like Richmond. Richmond versus North in the first week, that'd be huge. For two sides that, I know North have made some finals, but for two sides who, let's face it, haven't had great the last few years, and in Richmond's case the last couple of decades, finally playing finals would actually probably be good, because one of those sides obviously has to win if they play, because where usually if they're playing, say, the Geelongs, the Collingwoods, the Sydneys, who have played finals before, they've been there, they know how to do it, it's at least two sides that haven't had that experience.
Just
and
let us play Hawthorn. I'd be happy with that.
Please do. Please do.
Before we just move on to that, there's a couple of players I want to... Aaron Black looks like a really good thing for North Melbourne. They need to hold on to him. They need to put pen to paper. He's out of contract at the end of next year, and certainly there will be, I reckon Fremantle will definitely inquire about him. Lockie Hansen, another 30 touches, another 10 marks. Unbelievable. He's ranked, I think, 4th or 5th for marks in the competition. He hasn't played that many games, to be honest.
He was almost on the trade block last year, wasn't he? There were a lot of supporters that were sort
the
of
end of the season. They didn't get his contract signed until the last week of trade year, which it is now, not week anymore. But they got it done. He wanted a bit more money, and that's fair enough. But I think his defence is where he is and where he should be, and he's obviously more confident. He reads the play very well, and he's a smart footballer. He's probably not going to be that A grader that everyone expects a pick 3 to be, but he reads the play exceptionally well.
You don't go at pick 3 if you're an idiot.
No,
and that's basically what. You don't lose football ability, and that's what Lachlan Hansen does.
Yes, I think to the next game at the MCG, Richmond. They got their big scalp as well. They beat Fremantle, but Hawthorn at the MCG, it's not an easy task, and they did it with ease. They tore them apart in that.
The lid is off.
The lid's off. Lid's gone, mate.
Well and truly.
It's in the stratosphere. 12 wins. It should be 13 that's required to absolutely guarantee.
No, you'll play finals.
Oh yeah,
you'll definitely play finals.
Absolutely, 100% guarantee it.
No, you're playing finals.
You're playing finals.
Yeah.
It's all my life uncertainty.
Aren't you three wins ahead of ninth anyway? Literally ninth, not fake ninth, but actual ninth.
Probably.
So there's 3 games left. What are you worried about?
Mate, even ninth will get you finals.
I know. And we play Brisbane and GWS still, so.
Although actually, to be fair, in past years there'd be games you'd drop. Sometimes.
Not GWS, we wouldn't drop that.
Brisbane, GWS, Carlton, they're Richmond's next 3 games, and before we talk about the game quickly, they're the next 3 games. Realistically, if Essendon don't get shafted from finals, that game in round 23, Richmond-Essendon might be for that last top 4 spot.
It could be, but I think it really depends on how Sydney goes today. They should thrash the Dogs, of course. I think we dashed any chance of top 4 by losing to Sydney last week, because Fremantle's run home is absolutely piss easy.
Fremantle's is ridiculously
they've got
easy.
GWS, Melbourne, Port and St Kilda.
Yeah, just pencil them in now.
So the Port's the only one they could realistically drop.
It's at Patterson's though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. If it was in Adelaide, you'd go, oh yeah, but Patterson's, I can't see.
And Sydney, I think they've got a few tough games. That's the only thing, but losing a head-to-head game against them like that, so an 8-point game, is going to be the difference. I think the highest that Richmond can finish is 5th.
Yeah, I think yesterday especially, was the conditions or was it Richmond's pressure? I felt it was both, because the Tigers, they had 32 more contested possessions than the Hawks. They got to the ball first. Cochin was exceptional, 34 touches, 9 tackles, so he was going both ways. And I felt the rebounding Hawks players like Hodge, Gibson, Guerra, they didn't have the influence that they usually have. And I feel as if that Will Hawthorn, and we keep coming back to this at the end of every season, will Hawthorn's game plan stand up in poor conditions?
I think it does, and I really think that the reason Richmond has the edge on Hawthorn is because of the close relationship between Damien Hardwick and Alistair Clarkson, especially in the more development years that we had, so 2010, 2011, maybe even the start of 2012. We were in the pre-season, Richmond and Hawthorn were always training together and all these pre-season stuff, and we have Ross Smith, who is the defensive coach at Hawthorn now at Richmond, so we know their structures. You know, it's really clear to see why Richmond is so able to match it with Hawthorn, and I think it's just a bogey side, honestly. I think, you know, only losing to Geelong and now Richmond, Hawthorn are a very, very, very good side, and it will stand up in finals, I think.
I mean, to beat a clearance team of players like, I know clearances haven't been as relevant as they were, but the only time I think clearances have been probably relevant this year was that first quarter. And you completely neutralised Mitchell, Sewell, those sort of players, and to be honest, Cyril Rioli was just well beaten by Steve Morris, another scalp, sensational footballer.
Steve Morris did not have a goal kicked on him by Rioli. Rioli kicked one goal, but it wasn't on Morris, and it's the only time all year that Roughhead, Buddy and Rioli have been kept to 2 goals between them. Yeah. For 3 people, and first time Roughhead all year has not had a goal, has not kicked a goal. So kudos to Chaplin, who did a great job on him. Rance was best on ground, in my opinion. Absolutely demolished Franklin after quarter time. And Morris, who only had 3 touches, but he really blanketed Rioli, so I'll take that every day of the week.
Yeah.
And Pioplo was the only multiple goal kicker for Hawthorn, whereas Richmond had 10 goal kickers and 5 of those were multiple goal kickers. So,
and Franklin is the type of player that's made for Rance. Like, Rance probably struggles against, as we've seen, like against Cloaks or say even the Jonathan Brown type players, you know, the ones that may not be overly athletic but they're really, really strong. But when it comes to athletic players such as Franklin, and Franklin's probably one of his weaknesses is his overhead marking in that sense, like for a key forward it's not as good as others. That's the kind of player that you'd want to put Rance on because he matches up really well with him.
Do you think it's a follow-on from his injury? Because I was really surprised that Rance was just, when Franklin led at the ball and Rance was chasing him, Rance would actually catch him and overtake him to spoil, and it was ridiculous.
Yeah, like there's always that second week blues type thing, but to come out and kick 8 goals last week, it's obvious, you know, and I mean, Carlisle is no slouch, he's played well all year, so I mean, I think it's just, you know, he's just happened to play better. Like, he might still be a little bit down, he may not be 100%, but at the same time, if you can kick 8 goals one week, you can't suddenly go from that to nothing, so you've got to give credit to him.
And you're talking about the monster forwards, that's really why Chaplin was recruited, and he did actually have quite a good game on Petrie, even though everyone else had a bad game in the forward line when we played North, but yeah, again, Roughhead, I think even in the Port Adelaide days, he did very well when he played against Roughhead.
I think if Chaplin and Rance had have swapped their matchups, then I think he'd be in a lot of trouble. Like, Chaplin wouldn't be able to keep
like
with
we did
Franklin
with Collingwood.
Yeah, like he did with
I think that's what Hawthorn got wrong at the other end. Rewalt, he only kicked 3, but he went up the ground a bit more, and he was taking marks on the league. Gibson isn't a big player. He can go with it, but he can't get round to get that spoil. Lake's a better spoiler of the football.
Gibson
I think
had
we'd
to
agree.
be accountable for once.
And Lake was on McGuan, and Lake was sensational in my opinion. Had a great game.
Did they get that matchup wrong?
It's hard to tell, especially with I don't think Lake would have had the agility to keep up with Rewalt, especially once the rain started coming down. And that's really one of Rewalt's strengths, is just being able to outposition opponents. He's not a big brute of a forward. He can't wrestle, and that's where Lake would obviously have the advantage. So.
I think that was mostly their issue yesterday, Hawthorn. I don't think that their defence got or even used enough of the ball well because they start from the defensive half. I mean, all the top teams do. I mean, your Fremantles, your Geelongs, your Sydney, defence is where the attack starts. And yesterday, it just wasn't evident from Hawthorn. Those usual players with those raking left foots and overlapping handballs, it just didn't come.
And as well, Gunston was very well kept by Asprey, and I was surprised by that because it's a rarity. I think it's only happened like one other time this whole year, and Hodge was very quiet as well. I don't think there was any sort of tagging job done on him either. It must have just been an all-round press or something like that. But it was very surprising because Hodge really tends to stand up if it's in the balance these games, and he didn't. So I was quite shocked.
Yeah, I think on that note we'll move to obviously the game in Skoda. GWS played Melbourne.
Such a huge battle.
What do you go? It was actually a good game. I enjoyed watching it. Melbourne, guys, what are you doing?
To be fair, GWS are a good side. Like, I mean, as good as a side dead on the bottom of the ladder can be. For 3 quarters, if the games were played in 3 quarters and not 4, I think we'd see them with quite a few wins, really. Or at least very, very narrow losses.
Against Collingwood? Or
against, remember Geelong at 3/4 time, and they battled against quite a few others.
I think, we're talking about, they can't play a 4-quarter game, but yesterday it was evident they definitely did play 4 quarters. In the last quarter, no Melbourne player had more than 6 touches, but Devon Smith, Callan Ward, Steve Cornelio, and I think Scully had 9. They all notched up double figures, and Cornelio, he was a sub, so fair enough. Devon Smith and Callan Ward were great all day. I think the Giants are a lot more fit than we give them credit for, and I think those bodies are starting to get ready for AFL because they were fantastic in the last quarter. They just ran over the top of them. You've
got to remember though, with like the other teams that they've fallen against, say Geelong, Collingwood, etc., they do have that ability to go that little bit more gear. Like if they go at the 3/4 time huddle and go, all right guys, we got to get serious, we got to do this, more pressure, more this, let's get tackling. They've got their Brownlow medalists, premiership players, etc. You look at Melbourne and you go, come on guys, let's get serious. What's their serious? Like, hey, look at this.
Looking at that midfield, like, Jones and Viney were again great for Melbourne, but it sort of fell away right after that. Melbourne, I consider them to have probably the worst midfield in the league. Callan Ward, the way he moved with ease yesterday, and I think he's well on his way to becoming an elite footballer in a couple of years, if not already, because the way he obviously leads the side, he works hard, second to none up there and I think the Dogs really, they'll be a lesser side obviously because they missed out, but obviously they've got a good midfield as it is, or at least a developing midfield, but he's going to be a fantastic footballer, Callan Ward. We might be talking about him in the Pendlebury or the Swan echelon in maybe 3-4 years' time.
Yeah, no, definitely. He'll definitely be up there. With GWS though, when their midfielders develop, as everyone is expecting, you just look at the forward line that's going to be there. Like Cameron, the amount of goals he's kicking at the moment, when he has someone to actually take the number 1 forward, like for example, if Buddy went there, number 1 forward goes to Buddy. Him on a number 2 forward, or even a number 3, if Patton comes in and starts doing well, that's ridiculous. Like that is ridiculous talent in that forward line.
I think also we're discounting, I think, as Heath touched on last week, Tomlinson, who's had a fair decent season as a key position player. He presents well, he holds himself in contests, and again, it's this dilemma, is player A going to be there next year? Obviously, this is something that people aren't working into the GWS equation. They're going to get players in, players are going to leave. But obviously with a player, Cameron's going to be there for 10 years. He's a player that will be the first one. Every time his contract will come up for discussion, that's going to be top of the agenda. That's going to be, first, because we know that there's going to be Vic sides with deep pockets that are going to throw heaps of money at a player of his calibre.
Maybe Fremantle might finally land someone because they can't seem to get a key forward.
Well, Cameron, I reckon most clubs would be like, here's our list, just take anyone you like. Like, he's that kind of player. And with Tomlinson and that whole thing, particularly if Buddy went up there, would you hypothetically play Buddy as a winger or a half-forward flanker moving up?
Nah.
I'd probably play Tomlinson off the wing because he's got that agility, and I think he could go and play back, but I think he's much more suited to an offensive game style.
He does have a huge tank, Tomlinson, so that'll really serve him well, and it's going to be a really hard matchup. I think there are very few people that can probably match up on him. Maybe like Waite could do it, and Westhoff.
Before knocking him out.
That's about it. But yeah, like lots of teams don't really have that really tall, gangly matchup. And speaking of comparing midfielders to Scott Pendlebury, Lachie Whitfield, I think, is going to be the next Scott Pendlebury. He's just so classy in everything that he does, and he just has so much time, and that's really the key element of Pendlebury's game is just everything seems to slow down around him, and Whitfield has the same ability just to find space and do whatever he wants. He's going to be an absolute star.
He's still quite raw, just needs to build some size on him and be quite good.
It's kind of, on Melbourne, it's kind of confusing to see, because, in honest, full-strength their defence, I think, is okay. Frawley, Garland, McDonald, Nicholson, I've seen him play some half-decent football before. You know, I think...
Lyndon Dunn, the best one-on-one player in the league.
He's not... Yeah, he's actually done some okay shutdown roles
Officially
on small
by the
players.
AFL, he is the best one-on-one defender in the league.
Grimes as well, off a half-back play.
Grimes can play.
Garland is ridiculously underrated, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He can play tall, he can play small, but it's just the gelling of everything.
They've got a solid defence. Next year, their forward line's going to be Clark, it's going to be Hogan, it's going to be Dawes. They're obviously going to probably, in my opinion, need to recruit a small forward. Maybe one or two, actually, and...
Just keep Davey there. Don't play him off the wing like he is now, because he's completely ineffectual.
Davey's done. Davey's done. He's done. There's nothing... He's a ghost of what he once was, and he was an exciting football, and that's completely gone, as we've seen. I've been to Melbourne games, and he just doesn't look to have the passion and the excitement that he once had for football, and it's evident in his body language. Just even him walking the sidelines, or him when the ball's up the other end, there's no desire to set up or thing. He just sort of stands there, and it's sad, but. And that's the thing about Melbourne. There's going to be a decent forward line there in 2 years. They're going to have a decent defence in 2 years. This midfield needs to be fixed. How do they go about doing this? Because it's the worst midfield in the league by a mile.
Well, they'll be okay, because this year there is plenty of good midfielders and plenty of decent small forwards as well. So, this year every other club can go chasing the key forwards, and they'll be able to pick up 6 or 7 good midfielders and some forwards.
That's the thing. You can pick up as many kids in the draft as you can, but
got to develop them.
Yeah. You got to develop them. Is there anyone that they can throw money at and say, look, we need a midfielder? I mean, they lost Brent Maloney. Now, Maloney obviously wasn't playing well at Melbourne, but we know he's got some sort of talent, and that's why he obviously fetched that price tag at Brisbane. He's played okay up there, actually.
If GWS weren't to trade their number 1 pick, for whatever reason no one wants to put up, if Melbourne were to put up their number 2, knowing that, hey, GWS probably won't take Boyd if Franklin goes up there, then number 2 could be as good as number 1, really, because you're only going to trade for 1 if you're going for Boyd. So if they saw towards the end of the trade period that, say, number 1 wasn't going to get traded, they could then maybe put up their hand and go, hey, we'll trade a number 2 for a really, really good midfielder, like a top midfielder. Just wonder who'd bite with that one.
Yeah, this is obviously questions that can be answered later in the year when we obviously see who's going to be put on the market. I think on that note, we'll go to some sim messages and we'll be back to talk about the other 3 games from the round so far.
So the word on the street is that every weekday there is a radio show run by high school kids for high school kids. They can talk about literally anything they like.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about what advice would we give our 10-year-old selves.
Now we have some lol jokes.
We're going to settle this. Handkerchiefs versus tissues.
Can you dig it? Tune in 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. every weekday on 90.7 FM digital radio, or stream it live on syn.org.au. And while you're on our site, listen to our podcasts too. Can you dig it?
Ain't nobody got time for that, but y'all got time for Panorama.
Panorama, current affairs for young people, by young people. 4:30 to 5 p.m. weekdays. On SYN.
I think, by and large, Australian journalists do a pretty bloody good job.
A Viagra, if you like, for women.
Shouting at the TV is not the best way to get things done.
Panorama, news and current affairs on SYN.
Like what you hear? Get in on the action. Head to syn.org.au for more info. SYN Radio, where young people run the show.
You're back at Bound for Glory on SYN. Be sure to text in at 0427 767 767. We would love to hear your feedback. Going to talk a bit about Carlton Fremantle, a bit of a chat about. It looked like it was going to be a lot closer than what it ended up being. I mean, Fremantle really ran over Carlton at the end. And what was your perspective as a Carlton supporter, David?
At the game, usual Freo game, such a grind. I was falling asleep. It was.
Were you there with Ash? Because
we were both there, and that's when she came up with her brainstorm. But yeah, it was such a grinding game up until really the last quarter when Freo ran away with it, and we were in it, I guess. But the way they set up, they're so defensive, and they just have it down to attack, and it's just amazing the way they do it. I mean, it is annoying to watch as an opposition supporter, but the way they go about it's quite effective.
I think one of the things to take out of the game, Kate Simpson, Andrew Walker, Heath Scotland, they all had plenty of touches, but Malthouse said post-game that not one of his midfielders won their positions. Judd, 18 touches, Robinson, 23, 10 of those came in the 13 came in the second quarter, 0 in the next quarter. Keisha, 13 touches, McLean, 17, Gibbs, 21, after being probably close to worst on in the first half. Murphy, 13, the only person that beat him for worst on, and Curnow, 8 touches.
Yeah.
I want to ask your opinion on Bryce Gibbs, Damon. Unleash, please.
Unleash. He was by far the worst on ground last night.
He is so soft in the way that he plays the game, and he doesn't attack the ball.
He doesn't play close enough to his man. If he wants to be accountable, he needs to stay on his man the entire time. I find that he just has lapses where he runs off and he's just finds that his opponent's just out in the open, and you're just saying to yourself, what are you doing?
There was something in the fourth quarter where there was a mark up for grabs. Gibbs was in prime position to take it, and he just waits for it to bounce, and because of that, a Fremantle player runs on and they get a goal.
Yeah, get a goal. Yep, I remember that.
So from what I saw, he only, Gibbs, when you see Gibbs play, he's usually streaming forward. He's got the ball in hand, and he wasn't effective when, even that last night. I think he only went inside 50 once. He laid one tackle for the game, hence him not hanging around his man or even bothering to apply pressure, and he had 6 turnovers. So,
his strength is his disposal, and Malthouse is using him as more of a key defender, like a one-on-one defender.
The defensive side of his game is probably the weakest.
Maybe Malthouse knows that the season's not really, it's not a premiership year, so he's trying to train him to be a one-on-one.
I don't know if he's trying to develop the defensive side of his game or not, but he just hasn't got one, and I don't think he's going to develop one anytime soon. So just play him to his strengths, which is his attacking side of his game, and go from there, but it's just strange.
Really need to make a gif of one thing that happened last night. It was when, I forget who got the goal, but Stephen Hill streamed through the middle and kicked it to whoever goaled. But there were 2 Carlton players within about 10 metres, and they did not break out of a stroll to even put their hand out and try and touch Stephen Hill. And it was quite a joke, honestly, from a pressure standpoint. I can understand if they're tired and they can't sprint at them, but not even to put on any sort of implied pressure was an absolute disgrace, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's not much stats-wise that, and as you're saying, obviously from just watching the game, and because you watch the game, then you look at the stats afterwards, and listening to Mick Malthouse in his presser while I was actually doing this, and he was right. The stats were practically even. They're not a proper representation of what actually happened, but just watching the 2 different sides and the way that they did defend, Carlton obviously were way more lax, and Fremantle, there was always a Carlton player, and whenever Fremantle play against any side, the player against the Dockers, there's never room for them. You feel as if every kick and every handball, they need to work for it. And Carlton just didn't do the opposite. Fremantle were allowed to take ball in space on occasions. The way they kept the ball in that third quarter when they got that run on and they got that 28-point lead, which obviously Carlton chipped into, but they got that lead, which obviously was just too much for Carlton to overcome.
And I think that this was the last chance the rest of the league had for Fremantle not to make top 4. I think it's all done, dusted, penciled in. I think they'll have the last 4 wins. Obviously, GWS, Melbourne, Port Adelaide and St Kilda. I mean, you can pretty much pencil them in. Port are the only real resistance, but being at Patterson's, you'd say they'd probably win that. It's hard to see, but yeah, with Sydney playing Hawthorn, and there's a few other top 4 teams playing each other, including, I think, Essendon play them as well, those couple of them. I think it's going going to be, pretty much impossible for Fremantle to drop out. I think they'll be there.
One of the interesting comparisons I made, I think last night, we were all expecting perhaps one of Yaron, Betts or Garlett to come out and play pretty well, because Freo's got some okay small defenders, nothing to write home about, but Yaron and Betts did basically no damage. Garlett was okay. At the other end, Michael Walters and Hayden Ballantyne had 11 scoring shots between them, and even though Betts, Yaron and Garlett still had their pressure racks right up there, they were unable to do anything offensively.
Walters is, sorry Lindsay Thomas, sorry Woody, the best small forward in the competition. Honestly, everything just happens when he has the ball, and you really feel confident in kicking to him. He's surprisingly good overhead, and he's an absolute star. He could have been a Richmond, damn it. We didn't trade for him.
I think Ballantyne and Walters are two players that get under the skin of opposition teams and obviously opposition crowds, as we saw last night. You'd love them in your squad because they always have that, and they have that good intuition that a small forward has. When the ball's at the feet when the ball falls from the pack and it's at the feet, they're always there, or they know how to run wide and they know how to use space to their advantage. And they're obviously both good kicks at a football, and they're a dynamic duo. And you feel Freo, if they only got that really strong key forward, that they would be a top up there with Geelong and Hawthorn for this flag. And
a lot of people really dislike Ballantyne. I love the guy. He's a great, great player. I know it's a small forward's job, really, to be that, niggly forward. Everyone's supposed to hate them and whack them off the play, which is exactly what happened, and tore his jumper off, and he had played an absolute great game, and then caught Andrew Walker holding the ball. It's one of the few occasions where I really liked BT commentating, because it was hilarious. A little whisper in his ear as well. It was so good. But yeah, Ballantyne, he's a great guy off the field apparently, and he just performs his role. He's all basically for the team. I don't think he likes. Well, I'm sure he gets a little fun out of it, but I don't think he likes being.
You'd have to.
I don't think he likes being a dick on purpose to people. But
I think two things I just want to say about two other Fremantle players. Lachie Neale, super impressive last night. He's had a decent year. He's managed to keep his spot in the team and show some pretty good performances. Chris Mayne, and a very underrated footballer. He does his job week in, week out. Obviously, at times he can obviously move into the middle, but he's also been utilised up forward as well. He's a very good footballer.
And one more player, Nat Fyfe.
Yeah, I was about to mention Nat Fyfe.
Absolute superstar.
Yeah.
31 possessions, 16 contested, 7 clearances, 6 inside 50s, and the kicker, 71% disposal efficiency, which is in the stratosphere for Fyfe. God,
he's been a bit of a turnover merchant for a while.
And I think, honestly, he's only matched by Harry Taylor as the best aerialist in the competition, in my opinion. He can mark anything that comes his way.
I think we'll move on to the next game, the game over in Perth, West Coast, Gold Coast. Very open game of football, I felt. Both sides ended up with 49 inside 50, so the ball was at each other's ends, pretty much the same, was balanced. And I feel as if that the Gold Coast are starting to look like they're coming together. Something's starting to click. Obviously, as all good sides do, attack comes from defence. And yesterday they ran, they worked hard. They had Bock there for 3 quarters, who they used as a forward, obviously in having his own issues at the moment, ASADA related, obviously, which we'll speak about later. It feels as if they're starting to get together. Obviously, they've had injuries and they've obviously not been playing their best team, but players have been coming in, playing their roles, and it's not even just Ablett anymore. You got Prestia and Bennell and
Jack Martin next year.
Oh, jeez. Just on yesterday, those two, Prestia and Bennell, were sensational. And it's hard to see the Gold Coast not being one of those teams trying to crack into the finals next year. They'll be up in that group.
Because they've got Matera to come back. How many of their rucks are out? They've got Nichols out, Smith's out, Gorringe is out. I'm missing one person, I think.
Well, I think Charlie Dixon's been playing a fair bit of ruck.
But there was one dedicated ruck. Oh, forget about it. But they've got Bock back, which would be great to see, because they still don't seem to know where to play Stephen May at the moment. He seems to go back and forward, and it's going to be good for his development to get some continuity in. And really, just another pre-season will be huge for a lot of these players.
Dean Cox, fantastic yesterday, back to classic form, 41 hit-outs, 19 touches, 8 score involvements. So I think with Natanui out and Gold Coast having depleted rucks, no Nichols there, he just took advantage of the game.
Yeah, I think on the West Coast side of things, there were players. Obviously, the issue with West Coast at the moment is their top line is fantastic. It's elite, actually, but it falls away. And the issue is those players from 16 to 22 on match day aren't very good. Mm-hmm. So the issue is now they've got to work out, and obviously there are some good kids. There were good showings from Hutchings, and Wilson was pretty good yesterday. Wellingham was good. Dalziel was good. These are the kind of players that need to play well every week. They're obviously at times the whipping boys over there, and this is West Coast's issue, essentially. They've got to start consolidating their best 22, because we know that their best is very, very good, and their best is almost top 4, if not top 4. And is this what they need to target in the off-season? Players that can top up their best 22, because their top line is
consistent players rather than enigmatic players and that sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah,
I suppose so. But I mean, you do have a lot of players. Reece Conker, for example, is one that they're heavily targeting West Coast, and I'd hate to see him leave Richmond, but he is a WA boy. He's an Italian, so he loves the family, and they're playing him. They're putting forward quite a heavy contract, I believe. So he loves the club at Richmond, but I would hate to see him leave. But I couldn't hate him if he does leave.
Yeah, it's just a strange side. You get almost the feeling of what happened in 2010 that year when the Eagles. We're not going to call it tanking, but we'll call it what word would you use it? Because tanking doesn't exist.
Yeah, strategically resting players,
yes.
Putting them in for surgery.
And like at points in that 2010 year, they were absolutely terrible.
And they've shown signs of being that terrible this season.
And that's the funny thing. I remember Collingwood were playing them over in Patterson's, and we just literally destroyed them by, I forget how much, but it was like 8-1 in the first quarter, and it was just embarrassing. Like, they couldn't get their hands on it, and it was just like, this is like, you almost felt bad for them. But they're obviously got so much top-line talent that you can't see them staying there. Like, they're always a threat. They, at full strength, they can beat anyone, really.
Move on to the another game. There was the game between the Saints and the Lions yesterday, and I think a lot of it surrounded the controversy behind Ahmed Saad.
Another person, ASADA investigated. Everyone's under investigation.
Yeah, so he came back, had a pretty dark day. He had 2 goals, but he only had 3 touches the whole game. And in the Herald Sun, there was an image of him having a set shot. Brisbane fans giving him
that was bad. That was bad. I think that's worse than any. Well, it was obviously what happened to Joe Watson, but he's right there on the fence, and there was 6 or 7 people hanging over, yelling and screaming, and they looked pretty full on.
Do you think it was a show of solidarity? Because he came into the best 25 as a late in,
and then he came into the 22.
The best 22.
Yeah, I think it maybe was. I can't see his VFL form, from what I've been informed, was pretty poor.
Average, yeah.
So yeah, it must have been.
And it didn't really do them much good because the Lions ran over the top of them. Tom Rockcliffe had an absolutely stellar game.
He showed what we've been waiting for from Tommy Rockcliffe. Yeah. He's been experimented with up forward with Michael Voss, but he put him right in the middle, right in the thick of things, and he stood up. He had, let's go over his 39 touches, 18 contested, 6 clearances and 7 tackles. So he was not only winning the ball one way, he was also putting pressure on the opposition going the other way, and that's all you can ask, and it was a sensational, probably 3-vote performance from him.
And another big issue to come out of the game was Jonathan Brown doing a foot injury, I believe. So he pulled up quite early in the game, just from a normal lead. It didn't seem like an Achilles or a knee because he could run off, but I don't know, maybe something in his foot.
It's a ligament.
A ligament.
It's
a
nasty one. Apparently it's a plantar fascia.
Oh,
so it's a foot injury.
Yeah, no, it's a nasty one because you can sort of, at times when it starts to heal, it can feel fine, but then if you go on it too much, then it can go again. So he's got to be real careful. So.
We've got to actually, just on that question on the text line, text us in with your questions and thoughts and opinions on 0427 767 767. Do you guys reckon Simon Black and Jonathan Brown have played their last game for the Brisbane Lions?
Brown, maybe. I think he only stayed this year because they really... he stayed the captain because they really wanted him to. Not sure if he's ready to fully retire yet, because who do they have up forward to replace him? Brent Staker's been sensational. Great contested mark, but they don't have much depth. Maybe if Brisbane somehow manufacture a way to get pick 1 and get Tom Boyd, they could say, all right, Brownie, you can retire.
We'll let you retire.
We'll let you retire, yeah.
But if we don't, you're playing on.
Yeah. Well, they don't have anyone else. They've got, Cornelius, Lyle... I know there was one other person. But whatever. They don't have anyone good except for John.
And what about Simon Black?
I reckon he can play on. Maybe as a super sub.
He can, yeah. Maybe.
But do you want to keep a player on the list who's going to sit on the bench for most of the game?
It's worth it for the training that he gives to the younger players.
Yeah, I think they should just move on in the GWS type role as more of an assistant coach. And anyway, going to some messages now, and after that we'll be coming back with the ASADA investigation.
Hey Belle, I got us a new sound effect. We are so the Pooh Show right now.
We are not the Pooh Show. Is that because our name is Double Dump?
Yeah, of course it is. See, it works perfectly.
That's disgusting.
I reckon we do it. Okay, so Double Dump on Sin.
I will never share with you the real reason why I call Double Dump. Oh, stop it!
Double Dump with Blakey and Bell.
Sundays 1 p.m. on Sin.
Panorama, Melbourne's youngest newsroom.
I mean, how can something be non-lethal when people have died?
Hey, happy Valentine's Day. It's also International Condom Day. Would you like, one of our condoms? It seems like such a grotesque amount of waste of money.
This is not the Soviet Union. The government doesn't mandate that people can't drive a car.
It's like throwing tear gas, concussion grenades. 2 students lost eyes.
I think the sole purpose of Grindr is to meet people to have sex with.
Hey, sit up and listen to us. Take us more seriously, please.
Tune in to Panorama, 4:30 weekdays on Sin.
Raw, SmackDown, Main Event, NXT. All on the SmackDown Hotel, every Saturday night from 9 p.m. Only on Sin.
Tune in to We Need to Talk About Film on Sin to hear interviews from film buffs and reviewers from all around Australia. And of course, here's some funky tunes from your favourite films to get you through your Saturday night. Tune in to We Need to Talk About Film with me, Georgia, from 6 p.m. on Saturdays here on Sin.
Your face looks better bleeding.
Mosh Pit on Sin, the place to get the best punk and metal going round. Thursday nights from 9 on Sin.
Objection, 5 to 6 p.m. weekdays and 8 to 10 a.m. weekends.
Hi, I'm Kieran, blankety blank.
Objection on Sin.
Meanwhile, on something completely different,
Fish Camp finally ceased broadcasting on the 4th of March 2007. The station the fish demanded too high a salary, of course, and then the show had to be cancelled. It got popular, and they said, the show's nothing without us. We're the chemistry. Without us, you just got a box of water. That's all you have. We put the fish into fish camps. It's not called Watery Box Camp.
strap yourselves in for something completely different with Nick Mason, Tony Besselink and Little Tommy Needham. Saturdays from 7 p.m. on Sin.
You're on Bound for Glory on Sin. Text us in on 0427 767 767. Going to be chatting about the ASADA investigations. Now, there's going to be a few opinions thrown around, so make sure you get
Text
yours
us in your hate mail.
Yeah, absolutely. Disclaimer, allegedly. Just put that before everything that we say.
Allegedly. Obviously, as, you know, every waking moment, there's always something we find out. This has been going on for a very long time, 6 months now. and the AFL obviously at 7:40 p.m. on Friday night sent the press release out. Yes, we're going to be having a thing at 7:40 before the game. Everyone crapped themselves like, oh, the world's going to end, Everyone thought they were going to be done there and then, Essendon, but no. They were just announcing that they are going to be handing over the report on Monday to Essendon, I believe. They are going to, obviously, they're going to meet and obviously going to work out. And 400-page report, this report is a summation of the evidence that has been collated by ASADA. We're talking 13,000 documents, 150 interviews. Obviously, it's an ongoing investigation, as they stipulated. They want Stephen Dank to talk. They have new investigative powers. And it's an ongoing investigation. ASADA are going to work to their own time limits. And the interim report itself, it cannot contain any recommendations for players' suspensions. It also cannot contain any allegations of wrongdoing against the players. It's just a summation of evidence and what they've looked at the moment.
So they're going to get the report on Monday, but I heard that Essendon already had the report.
Essendon do not have the report.
But that's not what some prominent Bombers people on Twitter are saying.
They've already shredded the evidence.
On that, and I'm willing to go on record and say, so I've been told by, I'm not going to say who, but told by prominent people that there has been, how do I say this? There's been incorrect intel being put out by Essendon's PR people, which has been obviously around in Essendon circles, and I believe this is where this confidence, or this story where the players are, because obviously we just don't know yet, but you can't know for certain that the players are going to get off, and you can't know for certain. And then this is what I'm going to say. Anyone who claims to know, and obviously everyone has a source with this, if you think you know punishments, you don't, because there is still the AFL Commission, who is to convene twice in the next month to talk about this and assess the evidence. One on Monday, one on the 12th, and then I believe one further down the line. There is still the independent government body who has to assess the evidence and obviously hand their recommendations over to the AFL. So anyone who speaks, oh, I know the player, it's just going to be a fine, or the players are going to get 2 years, no, you know nothing. No one knows anything yet. 10 people have read that report as of this morning. I don't think, no one knows what's going to happen yet.
And it's interesting to see the amount of PR that obviously Essendon have. They've got a huge base on social media. Like, I think they're the leading club on both Twitter and Facebook. And so it's really up to the people in charge at Essendon to see, is it worth hiring these people, or is it worth, just letting it slide and saying just a blanket statement we'll wait until everything comes out.
The thing is, the moment, the continuation of blanket statements is just building and building and building this ridiculous, okay, what the hell went on here? Because, as it's been explained to me, this is incredibly complex. This is more than just an ASADA investigation. From what I understand, customs are involved, the tax office is involved. There is a lot of things that are left to play out, and it's a very complex web, and it probably explains why James Hird is 4 QCs.
And as well, you've just got to think about what Essendon is going to do if they are found guilty, for example, because they have to...
They'll fight it.
Obviously, but they have to be showing, we're completely innocent to their fans, because if at any point they seem guilty to the fans aren't going to turn up to games, and that's a huge knock to their, profits and all that sort of thing, especially with an Etihad deal. There's a cut-off point where North Melbourne experienced this quite a bit. If you don't reach that, you actually have to write the stadium a check.
I don't think they'll drop off. I really think they'll probably have record membership next year. It'll probably be 65, 70,000. I actually do, because, look, considering the circumstantial evidence, I'm going to call it, nothing's going to happen. Not just, oh yeah, no, here's a fine. I strongly doubt that's going to be the case.
Well, yeah, they've definitely brung the game into disrepute for sure.
Yeah, and I am someone who believes that I don't think James Hird will coach round 1 next year. On that circumstantial evidence and just the circles around the AFL, in which there is a large, what's the word I'm looking for? There's an insinuation that the game and the Commission are not happy with James Hird, and they have gone out of their way to paint him in a bad light.
Another person who was not happy at all, James Hearn, Dean Robinson, on Wednesday night, put a lot of blame on Herder and Dank.
Yeah.
Probably a little bit over top in terms of the interview from Luke Darcy, but it wasn't too bad. A lot of emphasis on unusual practices.
Say it again.
Black Ops. Black Ops.
Say that again.
But things, I think there was a lot of. I wouldn't, from my own point of view, I think there was more insinuations that it was a darker sort of nature. I think things that unusual practices such as the calf's blood and the pig's brain stuff, things that are okay but that have to get checked off. I think there was a lot of insinuation personally from that side that they've been doing a bit of wrong.
I think the issue here is it's obviously not only working out what was done, but it was working out who knew. And this is the thing, and this is one of the what I find hilarious. We have, obviously, Dean Robinson, who in his interview, and now, look, I'm not going to take that as stone-cold evidence that Essendon are going to get smashed either, because, obviously there are a few inconsistencies that I'm not sure about and that I picked out. But he's blaming Stephen Dank and James Heard. The Essendon Football Club and James Heard are adamant that it was Robinson and Dank. Now, if we ask Stephen Dank, what's he going to tell us? Oh, well, it was Robinson and Heard. Someone's got to stand up and say, yeah, look, I did it. Or not, I did it, or I was in charge.
Generally, you know the truth, and this usually works for most things. When someone decides to implicate themselves, that's generally when you know you're getting closer to the truth, because it's easy for everyone to go everyone else's fault and all that kind of thing. One guy who I think would almost benefit from this is Bomber Thompson, who is just sort of sitting there nicely. If Heard doesn't coach, he gets to take over this side that's getting there.
The question is, I don't think Bomber Thompson knows, because this is, again, another thing. Essendon are going to be finding out things when they are shown this report tomorrow that they don't know. There's a lot of things that happened at Essendon last year, and if you've got certain regulatory bodies involved and obviously law enforcement, things happened there in 2011 and 2012 that I don't think even Bomber Thompson would know of, that maybe even not James Heard would have known of. But I think on what James Heard may or may not, he's obviously, there's through this circumstantial evidence, one can probably estimate that he probably knew a bit more than what he's letting on. But obviously, I don't think to the full extent.
Yeah.
So he knew about some certain stuff, but other things I think he was kept in the dark. That's my educated opinion.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that really confuses you? Because it's one of these stories that you chip away and there's just more.
Just two things come out of it recently. Bruce Reid and De Morton saying no involvement. They were the club doctors, and also something that came out today. JHRP6 is linked, and that is an S2 banned substance.
Yeah. Again, on the circumstantial evidence. Now, we've got to remember with WADA and obviously ASADA, the way they work is it's between beyond reasonable doubt, and it's beyond reasonable doubt and what's the other one? It's just above beyond reasonable doubt, but it's not, obviously not what a criminal case would, burden of proof would be required, like a 99%.
Yeah, and the only way that they could get off in terms of not negligence is absolute negligence or no negligence, I think.
It's the balance of probabilities that it would be.
Yeah, and I think that's only if a rival competitor spikes your drink, for example. I think that's the only
There's
case.
A high burden of proof required. Right at the moment, there's a balance of probabilities that exists that obviously ASADA and WADA need to prove, and on the circumstantial evidence, it's looking likely. I'm not going to say for sure because I don't know, but it's kind of looking likely to someone who evaluates the whole evidence thing that it would take an incredible turn of events to get Essendon out of this.
And it'll be interesting to see players that might move clubs, how that affects them, and whether they'll actually be penalised next year.
Yeah,
Monfries, for example.
Or maybe Cramery, who might be, going to the Dogs. That could be a potential thing.
It's not only that. I think there's also the fact that we might. Also, there's players that were involved in the sort of issues. If they were, obviously there's been suggestions it was an unsanctioned trial, and you can't imagine too many players would be happy, and that could obviously lead to player movement at the end of the season. But at this stage, and this is what I'm going to just say my final word on this. If anyone's telling you about penalties, they are full of crap because it's not at that stage yet.
Yep.
Anyway, we'll move on. There's some football today, thank God. First of all, Etihad Stadium at 1:10. The Swans take on the Western Bulldogs. And what are we expecting to see from the Western Bulldogs today? Obviously, the Swans are an elite outfit, but what can the Dogs show today that would at least please their fans?
Well, they pride themselves on their contested ball, and I think they can really take it to Sydney in that regard. They'll probably win the clearances or something like that, but lose horribly.
Well, if they can win the clearances against Sydney, that's a damn good effort.
If anyone can do it, it's the Bulldogs. And Jared Grant had quite a good game last week, and hopefully he can follow on with that. But with a really stalwart Sydney defence, who knows what's going to happen? And they don't have the best key defenders either, the Dogs, and I think Sydney are really going to stretch them in that regard.
At least it's at Etihad, though. If it was in Sydney, I think this could be really ugly.
Yeah, but I think it'll be 10 goals plus.
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah. It'll stop it being a 3-figure.
Yeah. Tips, anyone? Swans.
Yeah, Swans. It's sort of that round where you think that the Dogs will get close and they'll push, but yeah, the Swans will run out with it.
Considering this round so far, who knows?
It's upset round so far.
Well, the past 4 times against the Dogs, the Swans have beaten them by a combined total of 174 points.
Ouch.
So it might be another shellacking.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll move on to the showdown. Adelaide and Port. Very interesting game. Obviously, Port in the 8 at the moment. Adelaide can finish 9th, and obviously with other factors can make finals. Port have had the wood on Adelaide in the showdown lately, and I can't make. Why is this? I can't understand. Why is this? Can anyone? I don't understand.
Well, normally it's because they have actually something to play for and they're not in finals contention. And now the opposite is kind of reversed. So maybe Adelaide will really lift for the showdown and come out strong. It was really Taylor Walker that tended to carve them up when Adelaide were having a better year and were winning these showdowns. But with Walker out and basically no forwards left for Adelaide, it's going to be quite tough.
I think if Port win this game, I think that's the top 7, or if allegedly Essendon were to stay in the finals, that's the top 8 almost done, because that is 2 wins between Port and Carlton, and Port still have Gold Coast, I believe, to come. So you'd probably pencil that in. They're playing them at Amy, so if Port were to win that, you're pretty much gone. It's too hard back from there, really, because so if this is a major game for Port, I think you pretty much have that top 7 or 8, depending on.
And Lewis Johnston is going to make, I'm not sure if it's his debut or one of his early first few games, after showing some really, really good form in the Sandful. So hopefully he'll have a good game. Tips, everyone? I might go for Port, yeah.
I'm going Port.
Yeah.
Get on the Port train.
I'm going Port, but it could go either way.
Yeah, Port. And last but not least,
the blockbuster.
This will be a sensational
Sunday
game
twilight,
of football.
not on free-to-air blockbuster.
I'm telling you, the AFL is doing a good job of trying to hide the riots that are going to happen later.
Oh, the crowd cam. We need a crowd cam.
Yeah, it's going to get ugly there. 80,000 people.
Just cam.
They might bring Hayden Ballantyne down to the G just to get him involved.
You wouldn't even notice him in there. There'd be so many other fights.
Yeah.
70,000 people expected to be at the game. And
the rest.
It's 4:40. A lot of people aren't going to get out of it.
Essendon Collingwood though.
Yeah, 70,000.
All right, I'll allow it.
I'll allow it.
But
Joe Watson's back for the Bombers. It's a big in. Obviously, their midfield at times looks a little shaky when he's not there, but I think that overall, hopefully, when the development ends for Essendon, period ends, that they're going to have one of the better midfields in the competition.
And from all reports, there are a lot of people that consider Collingwood favourites for this, which is interesting.
Considering the week Essendon have, they're going to have a breaking point at some time. Now, many people thought this was last week, but I don't think so. I think they just played a great side in Hawthorn. But at some point, it's going to have to burst.
Yeah, and I think the ins and outs for Essendon aren't too good. But we'll go for tips. I'm probably going to go for the Pies.
Ooh, traitor.
Yeah, no, I'm going for Essendon. So
Essendon.
I'm going for Collingwood.
They've been in the front page of the paper every week, so Essendon, they'll win.
All right, so thank you again for listening to Bound for Glory. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Bound for Glory FM, as well as on Facebook, and be sure to check out boundforglorynews.com for all your footy news, fantasy news, and most importantly, under-18s coverage with player profiles, phantom drafts, and weekly round updates of the TAC Cup. And while you're at it, follow Bound for Glory News on Twitter and Facebook as well. And as well, we've got an e-player now, which is quite good, a little widget on the side there. So be sure to check that out. It's got highlights and everything. But that's about all for this week. We'll be back same time, same place. See ya.
I'm invincible. I'm paying money. The girl's happy. She's got no money. I got my rocks off. Oh, how good is this?